The sooner you get to the point of just accepting things for what they are and not what you think they should be, life as a whole begins to transform magically. Here's another piece of advice I want to give you as well. Nothing outside of you is going to make you feel any better than how you feel inside yourself.
Welcome to the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast, the ultimate destination for accredited investors and entrepreneurs seeking alternative wealth-building strategies. Discover how to fast-track your journey to wealth and time freedom by thinking outside the box. If you're ready to join the ranks of the Contrarian Capitalists and learn the most effective ways to reach your financial goals faster, you're in the right place. Let's get started with today's episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast.
Hey everyone, thank you once again for listening to the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast. I'm your host, Sylvania Harrod. And as always, I'm grateful that you took the time to be able to listen to this. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about why I believe the game is rigged. And so stay tuned with us for a little bit, and I'll be able to explain why my thesis is that the game is rigged. As I spoke about in a previous episode, the key thing is understanding the rules to the game. Because once you understand the rules of the game, it makes things much easier to know how to play it. And why I think the game is rigged is because going through this journey of private equity, I began to realize a few things. If you look at 88% of the Fortune 500 companies around the world, they're all owned by the same private equity firms. The top three, you look at the top three shareholders, you're going to see the same names time in and time out. So when you think about those private equity firms and them sitting on the board seats and them being able to have controlling interest, what does that end up meaning? It means that the economy is driven by those who have the keys to the car. So unfortunately, if you look at things and let's say you go ahead and you go in the world of traditional investments, so you're looking at stocks, bonds, treasury bills, etc. In that world, what ends up occurring is that you are at the mercy of a popularity contest. Think about it being back in high school all over again, right? That popularity contest is going to determine exactly if your investments go up or your investments goes down. But who's actually driving the car? One of my main intentions around creating this podcast and creating this community is centered around getting you in the proper car. So now let's look back at those private equity firms. You think about the biggest and baddest ones out there. Did you realize that majority of those staff that work at those largest firms all come from the same eight schools? So if you did not come from those schools, guess what ends up happening? You don't have access. You don't even know where the key card is. If you didn't join a special secret society at Yale University, you're not going to be able to have relationships with different individuals that are going to make the mission actually possible. So you have to recognize the game is rigged. But it doesn't mean that's the only option. One of the core philosophies that I have is that when I think about options, first thing I got to do is figure out what's the actual rules of the game. Then once I figure out the rules of the game, now I can actually begin to play the rules of the game. If you look at it in general, the economy is stimulated based upon two primary things. What's going to help consume more goods because it drives up prices, and what's going to help us be able to create sustainability for our personnel. So just look at the art of taxes, right? Taxes are a system that is structured to be able to help the greater good of humanity. Now, we can argue back and forth around should we tax more, who should we tax, etc. That's not my intention behind there. I'm not the tax person. But what I will tell you is that even the US tax code is based upon two core principles. Like, how can we stimulate more consumerization of goods? And how can we employ other people to go out and build the things that we need people to do? So in a capitalist society, that means that there's opportunity. That means that if we look at two key elements, which I'll dig into in a further episode, we look at, all right, well, we're going to build businesses and for revenue generation, and then we're going to go ahead and offset those gains with real estate. People need a place to live. They need a place to go shop. They need a place to go to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. So understanding those concepts, you begin to realize, okay, I want to play a different game. Robert Kiyosaki talks about, and you hear me mention this time and time again, the ESBI model. It's a quadrant. He calls it the cash flow quadrant. And so in the upper left-hand corner, you have an E, which stands for employee. As an employee, the amount of leverage you have is limited. You can go ahead and you can be a great employee and you can do a lot of different things, but in that element, you don't have as much leverage as people in a different tier. Move over to the bottom left part of the quadrant, you have the S, which stands for self-employed. With being self-employed, you are still under leveraged. Because the reality is, depending on what structure you happen to set up your company, it's still one person. If we look at most of the businesses throughout across America, they're typically one-person entities. While there's lots of opportunity you can do in a one-person entity, you do not have the advantage because you're not stimulating the level of the economy that's needed on the right side of the quadrant. On the right side, you have big business, which stands for the B in the upper right. Bottom right, you have I, which stands for investor. So if you look at that entire element, who has the most leverage? It's typically the investor. And the investor has the most leverage because you are rewarded based upon investing in things that are going to stimulate the economy. So thinking about that, what's the number one goal you want to be able to do? I'll just take a break for a quick second because I want you to think about this. When you think about the world of an investor, what are we actually looking at? And I'm not talking about traditional investments. It's kind of a joke in the world of like retail. You hear about, oh, it's just a retail investor. Don't worry about it. Anything that anybody can have access to is cool per se. You can be able to do things, but I'm a guy that's based everything based upon odds. The odds are much greater and you have greater points of leverage when you are able to get into what's called alternative investments. That is the world that most private equity lives in. In that world, you're looking at alternative investments. You're not looking at publicly traded securities. You're looking at things that are going to be able to grow. These are funds. These are syndications. These are acquiring companies through mergers and acquisition. These are acquiring real estate. These are alternative investments. And so through that process is where I'm really going to be interviewing and highlighting people doing these different journeys. After these first few episodes or so, I want to make sure the foundation is laid. So you'll hear me mention things about alternative investments and why I firmly believe that is your greatest leverage point in life. If you can go ahead and you can either invest into businesses while protecting your downside via real estate, I'm telling you guys, it's game on. That's going to be the most fun you're going to end up possibly having, because what you're doing is you're truly understanding the rules to the game. I'm a firm believer that you have a couple options in life. If you are going to go ahead and scream and yell at something, just know what you're doing unconsciously. Unconsciously, you're saying that is never to be for me. So in my element, when I look at it and I look at things, I said, okay, what is it that I want to understand and I want to bring into my life? You celebrate what you want to bring in there. So you have a lot of people that are like, tax the rich, bring them down. They're playing the game. Like they're doing all these things and they're bad. We make them out to be the boogeyman. The reality is, if that does not exist, everything that you know, love, and trust will not exist, because they're playing the rules to the game. If we look at it and we say, okay, well, this person paid this percentage of tax. Well, okay, how much risk did they take on? How much did they have to leverage in order to get to that point? How many jobs were created? How many houses were built? How many buildings were built? Because when you get into a higher tier and a higher level, guess what happens? You're going to have more risk. I'm a firm believer that those in the cheapest seats chirp the loudest. The people that are complaining about athletes making millions of dollars are the ones who can't even afford to get into the stadium. So I typically don't take any critical feedback from somebody that I would not want to replace their life. I'm not swapping seats with them. And I get it. Like that may sound a little arrogant and things to be there, but I'm just talking about from experience. while I can learn from every interaction that I have there, I'm not going to take haircutting advice from somebody who has a horrible haircut. That's just 1 + 1 = 2. The math is mathing. So think about that when it comes to your strategy and your things you're looking to do. Because the reality is if you're part of my community, you probably think the same way. You just haven't found a place where people are talking about these different things. And that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to ensure that you have access to things that most people don't want to talk about. And the sooner we understand the game is rigged and realize that there's a reason why the rich keep getting richer, it's because they're the one making the rules. So you have a choice. You can either sit on the sidelines and complain about everything that's happening and become a victim, or you can put your big boy shoes on and realize, okay, I had a moment of recognizing what I thought it was versus what it reality is. And if you look at a lot of things that stress people out to be able to be there, it's typically because the story in their head isn't matching up with the reality, and there's dissension in between the two. The sooner you get to the point of just accepting things for what they are and not what you think they should be, life as a whole begins to transform magically. Here's another piece of advice I want to give you as well. Nothing outside of you is going to make you feel any better than how you feel inside yourself. Most of the time, those that are chirping the loudest is because in their reality, they began to give up. They see that the game is rigged and they got discouraged. But they built such a great relationship with discouragement and disappointment and helplessness that they began to identify as that. But it doesn't sound like that. What it sounds like, oh, I can't believe these millionaires are complaining about this. Oh, I can't believe these persons are asking for a handout. Why are these billionaires need a city to build a stadium? Yada, yada, yada. They begin to cast stones. If you cast stones, here's another interesting point. If you cast stones at the thing that you secretly want to attract in your life, it will never happen. Because unconsciously in your brain, it seems like it's a threat to what you want to do. So your brain will not be able to process it. You'll get it for a period of time, but it'll fleet. Because secretly, you're not sure if you're worthy enough for it. And all we are is a consistent of our own programming. And the program only understands the programming. You want to change your reality on the end of the equation, you got to change the variable. The variable is you. The constant is life is going to life. So, as I begin to land this plane really quickly, what I want you to know is that I am here to support you. I'm here to guide you. I'm also here to call you on your shit. Because that's our job. As leaders, as silverbacks being out there, we got to make sure our troop is taken care of. That we know exactly that my best interest is always thought of first. And that's what we're doing throughout the world. We're spreading that. We're going ahead. That's the part of leading. There's a lot of Indians, but not enough chiefs. So understand rules of the game. The game is rigged, but we have the opportunity to play in it. And that's your choice. So it's my little nugget for today. Hope this quick, short ride as you're going to work or whatever you're doing, working out, was impactful for you. As always, stay grateful, my friends. And you can follow me on all social media platforms at Sylvania Harrod. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, rate, and leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback helps us reach more people ready to explore contrarian investment strategies. Stay connected with us on social media for more expert insights, behind-the-scenes content, and updates on upcoming episodes. You can find all the links in the show notes. Until next time, stay bold, think differently, and keep pursuing the legacy you deserve. Thanks for listening to the Contrarian Capitalist Podcast.